We're going to continue last week's essay on puzzling, and it was puzzling in the fact that we put a puzzle together last week. And there was a brief commentary about how, as a real small boy, my father would challenge me, and we would have these contests with puzzles. And in selecting the right puzzle to do, we'd enter an attic with hundreds and hundreds of puzzles. And we talked briefly about how we would spend so much time searching and selecting and just the right puzzle to compete with, because that's exactly what it was. Also talked about how my dad always seemed to get his puzzle together before I did, in spite of the fact that he had to look over his glasses and he was bigger and heavier and older, won every time. It wasn't until years later when I found out how and why, and I want to convey that to you this week, next week, sometime soon. So you got to stay with us. You got to stay with us. Talked about taking time to select a puzzle. I want to take a moment to examine that for a moment, because I'll tell you, my experience has been, again, through the years, that I've encountered so many people who are doing what they do for a living consequentially. Does that sound familiar? They just happened to be at a certain place at a certain time and get a job offer, and they took it. Earl Nightingale, in his famous recording, The Strangest Secret, talks about the young military fellow who meets a sweetheart in her hometown, marries and settles there. And I responded to that because it's exactly what happened to me. And there was an old phrase we used to cling to about taking some time to get our act together, get our head straight. And they might go on for days and weeks sometimes without actually getting a job. But there came a time. And in this particular case, this young fellow was standing outside the local drugstore and kind of licking on an ice cream cone, pondering, thinking, and one of his buddies, new buddies, came up and said, "Hey, when are you going to get a job? I mean, boy, you've been hanging around a long time." He said, "Well, I'm getting ready." He said, "I tell you what, you ought to come over to the plant. It's a good job. We got a bowling team. We play softball in the summer. Got a good league, and it's a good job." And the guy said, "Yeah, I think I might come over and put in an application." And he does that. And darn if he doesn't get hired. And that's the end of him. The end of him and his capacities. You understand what I'm saying? Now, as he gets this job and his time is committed now, as he's cut a deal in exchange for a paycheck to help them fulfill their goals. He's an employee. Nothing wrong with that if you know that's exactly what you intend, but he's there. Obligates himself with a little rent and car payment and what have you. And maybe his wife gets pregnant, and pretty soon he doesn't have the time to go out and search and ponder and wonder and maybe select something that makes his heart sing. And that's terribly important. Over the years, we have done tens of thousands of socioeconomic reviews. Sometimes they were called job relationship analysis, sometimes socioeconomic review. At one time, it was an entertainment analysis, actually. But I've always had the question there, that if you suddenly became financially independent, if you didn't have to, would you continue in the work you're doing? 87.5% of the people said no. Some were more adamant than that. They had a special language that they employed to the question. No, they wouldn't. They would not continue what they're doing. And we would say, okay, let's take this scenario. If you had a choice, could do anything you wanted to do, regardless of the educational requirements and where you had to live to do it or whatever, if you do anything you wanted to do, what would you do? And a lot of people got tears in their eyes, and I've had a few sob. They had lost that dream a long time ago, had set it aside, wasn't for them, or someone had disqualified them. Someone had disqualified them. But if we sat there and waited, I would say in such a high percentage of the cases, we can almost say 100% of the people, when given the time, and really having thought about it, came up always with a job that would make a contribution to their family, certainly, and hopefully to their community and to their city and state and to the nation and possibly the world. They want to make a contribution. Some of them do it in a variety of ways, but that's what they're up to. It was kind of fascinating. Out of all those interviews we've done, we began to realize that if everyone was doing what they really, really wanted to do, and they just happened to live in the same community, the needs of that community would be fully served. Isn't that fascinating? We ran into a dentist that wanted to be a garbage man. Well, I'm not saying he wanted to ride on the truck and tip the garbage, although he wasn't above that. But he was concerned about garbage collection, garbage disposal, you know what I mean, how that was all done, had some very specific ideas about it, and had always been that way since a young man. And his folks, now his dad was a dentist, and his grandfather was a dentist. And they told him, well, I mean, of course we're going to pay for your school if you become a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer, but I'm not paying a penny for you to be a garbage man. Okay, so what was he? He was a dentist, and a good dentist, but not a fulfilled one. Of course, we ran into homemakers who wanted to be pilots, and pilots who wanted to be plumbers. You know what I mean? In other words, it seemed to be a whole shifting, if you would. Very, very few, too few people were saying, oh no, I could become financially independent, and I would go to do what I do tomorrow. I would. Would you? See, that's the thing. Would you do what you're doing? Terribly, terribly important. We went on to talk about the puzzle, how there's steps to do it, and we talked about that the fact that we have to crystallize what we're up to by taking the picture of the cover of the puzzle as a guide, and we call that crystallizing. And in crystallizing, we have to understand that we have the mental capacity to envision, to imagine, to create a dream that can be so vivid, and is one that we can move to and celebrate. We call it telesthesia. A couple of weeks from now, we'll be getting into that process on how to, in fact, it's probably the most powerful process that we have at our disposal when it comes to achieving, and yet so few people use it. We know that's true. Oftentimes when we go into the future, we go to wonder, to wish, to worry, okay, to want, rather than to celebrate. And that's a big thing. But crystallizing, know what it is you're up to. Then categorize. In the puzzle, we separated the pieces by color. And while we were doing that, we created a structure, a framework that gave us our boundaries. Now, in life and in the socioeconomic environment, we're suggesting there be four categories. One of them is the spiritual, emotional facet of our life. Spiritual, emotional. The reason we chose spiritually emotional and put them in the same camp, if you would, is that most of your major religions throughout the world on a spiritual basis say that God is what? Love. In other words, God is love, and that it could be said that the devil is an anthropomorphization of fear. Because whenever a person goes into the fear mode, when we refer back to life formula, as we've done that in the past, there is inappropriate behavior. Okay, and those unkind things done, inappropriate behavior. So spiritual, emotional, we put in the same camp. The second category would be social secular. Social secular. Now there should be some clear thinking about this. What is that going to be like? Who am I going to spend my time with? Am I going to be married or single? What activities am I going to participate in? How am I going to relate to my life and making a living and what have you? And then a third category would be the, where are we going here? Physical, tangible. Physical, tangible. That's how am I going to take care of my health and body, and what am I going to acquire with my efforts? In those physical, tangible, what kind of house am I going to live in? What kind of car am I going to drive? This type of thing. Okay, where am I going to live? And then the fourth part would be our professional, vocational. Professional, vocational. So we're going to be a professional, we're going to get a job. Okay, professional, vocational. How are we going to provide for our social, secular, our spiritual, emotional, and our physical, tangible acquisitions? How are we going to do that? Terribly important. And there should be some balance here. There should be some balance. Now, what does that mean? This has been a difficulty with a lot of people, looking for balance. We know that in a familial community, socioeconomic state, you can't give 25, 25, 25, 25. I mean, it doesn't work out that way. You're going to sleep 8 hours out of a day, and then you're going to have to work 8 hours. You've only got a few hours left over. And so you have to find a way where when you're engaged professionally, you're satisfying yourself what? Spiritually. I mean, in other words, you have to find a way where they blend together so that wherever you happen to be, you will be focused. You'll be okay. In other words, and so that where you are, you don't wish you were somewhere else, in other words, constantly. That's tragic. And so it may be, in order to have 100% life, it may be 60, whether it be 30, 20 and a 10. You know what I mean? It may work out that way. But also, if it's well thought out, it can give you a lot of peace of mind and a sense of balance. We have other essays that will delve into that more closely, but this is what we mean by categorizing. Now, how do we do this in conjunction with crystallizing? You've got to write. You've got to cut and paste. Look through magazines and cut out pictures and paste them up. You've got to write. There's a certain magic at the end of every pencil that when you're thinking, if you write, you will have more creative thought. If you don't write things down, they seem to bog down in your mind, and your creativity is stifled. You've got to write. Don't have to write well. You don't have to worry about the spelling, but you got to write. Earl Nightingale, again, one time years ago, said that an idea, okay, is like a slippery fish. You got to spear it right away, or it'll slither away, and it'll never return. How many of us have had ideas, and we knew they were good ones, and they're gone because we didn't write it down quick enough? Or if we didn't write it down, it didn't get crystallized, and so we found that we wanted this, and then we wanted that, and ended up with hardly anything. Yeah. And so crystallize, categorize, and then compartmentalize. Compartmentalize is focus. Decide what it is that needs to be done, give it a priority, and focus on that until it's done. There's a thing, I'll tell you, this would really work too. Compartmentalizing is do it now. You've heard that. Do it now, okay? And if you can't, some things you just can't do right now, the idea would be to pick a time and a place where you're going to start. Okay, now pick a time and a place when you come. Now you may not be able to read that chapter right now because you're driving down the highway, but at 2:30 this afternoon I'm going to have a break and I'll do it then. You know what I mean? Do it now, plan it then. Plan it for then. Okay, that's the key. Now, the big point of the last essay, we completed the puzzle, we put it away, and I did so without ever mentioning the word goal. And I said at the time that I had a little difficulty with that. And I began to tell the story of Frank Betcher and how he went to a home and a sales manager came to his home and he wrote a goal list and felt that was the beginning of a whole new life for him, and I'll bet it was. And I thought, wow, what a good idea. And it wasn't long before I became a sales manager. Now, I read the book the second day in the business, second or third day, but I was a manager probably within 6 weeks to 2 months, at least a counselor where I could recruit and train and work with other people. And from the very beginning, I thought, boy, that's going to be one of my tactics. And so I'd recruit someone, and in a few days I would see to it that I'd drop by their house and knock on the door, and they'd permit me to come in. Never failed to. And they were always quick to offer a cup of coffee or something. And while sitting there, I'd say, oh, by the way, just like I'd read, say, oh, by the way, what I'd like to do is to see your goal list while I'm here. And they never had one. Never had one. Oh, you got to have a goal list, I'd say. And just like Frank's manager, I would pull out a couple pieces of paper, number 1 to 10, and hand it to him. And say, just make a short list, 10 things that you'd like to achieve, acquire, or have in our relationship together. I'll tell you some things here. No one that I can recall ever finished the list. No one under those circumstances ever finished the list. Now, I know how you feel. Give me a piece of paper, I'll show you a list. But somehow it seems that it didn't work that way in real life. No one finished the list. They get down to like 7, 8 maybe, once in a while 9, but never 10. Unless they were facetious about it. You know, just kind of not taking it very seriously, they might, but even at that, it wasn't very common. Another thing I noticed, there was always a sense of stress, I mean, in the exercise, sort of discomfort there. Another thing was everybody had the same list. They had north, south, east, west, young, old, they all had the same list. What was on that list? Home, car, clothes, trip, Everyone had that. And I began to wonder, is that their list? Is that really their list? Or is that society's list? Is this what's been concluded that you're supposed to have in order to be an appropriate citizen? Maybe that has something to do with it. That's why people don't drive themselves to acquire it. We don't know exactly. All I knew is that it was not a good exercise, and never was. Oh, and by the way, I would talk to them about developing the list and prioritizing the list, putting number one, what they wanted and so on. And they wouldn't do that. I didn't do it either. Great idea. And by the way, people who do it do extraordinarily well. We're saying, well, why don't people do it, however? I'll tell you how seriously they don't do it. In 1972, I had a national sales organization, 35 offices all across the country. And in that year, we did a promotion where I always carried this book with me. When I was in an office or in someone's car or in their home, all they had to do was say, Bern, let's see your goal list. And if I couldn't reach to get it, if it wasn't that close, if I couldn't reach to get it, turn it open and say, there it is, and it would include being prioritized within 10 days and be complete. But if they asked me that and I didn't have it updated or I didn't have it with me, they would win $10,000. That's a pretty good contest. I was that serious about them doing this. No one ever asked me. Not a single person ever said, Bern, you have your goal list. Even teasing. Now, part of the deal was what? For them to get the 10 grand, they had to have their list, yeah. And I think that's why they never asked me, because they didn't have their list. Fascinating, yeah. Why? Well, what did I do with that? Anyway, some years later, see if I can get this just right here. Some years later, see if this works out okay. In thinking about this, began to get an idea. I had developed a concept called the life formula, which you're all familiar with if you've seen the life formula, and the time lifeline. And the time lifeline is a line that extends between this moment now and a questionable place in the future that represents time and energy, essentially our life. Okay. And I thought, oh my, I see what's going on here now. I come up with some psychographics, we call them, psychographics, and began to ask people, and it's been thousands and thousands of people, to look at these lines as I draw them. Line A, line B, line C, or line D. And once again, line A, B, C, or D. And I ask people, which of those lines most closely reflects your feelings when you think about setting a goal or having one set for you? Okay. Let me tell you that only 3% of the people picked A. 97% picked B, C, or D. 97%. With a vast, vast majority, I would say it's probably as high as 91, 92% picking C. C was the most popular one. Now, you put that together with the fact that reports have said ever since I can remember, that only 3% of our population becomes financially independent. Only 3%. The good news in that, of course, that 1 out of every 200 Americans are millionaires. It's kind of an exciting figure. And if you're not broke, it means probably closer than you think you are. If you had some ideas. But the thing of it is, if only 3%, I began to say, well, is the very reason people are picking B, C, or D the same reason that they're not selecting goals and achieving them? It's kind of a clue. And then the day I put this up here like this, I took line C, the most popular, and put it on the time lifeline and immediately knew what the difficulty was. Immediately. Remember when we put the puzzle together, it got easier and easier. But let's say you're an entity here walking along the time lifeline and you don't like the way things are going. I mean, you want more. We could say this is a negative. So you pick a positive. You pick a goal. This is what I want to do and be. It's called a goal gradient. Makes sense. I mean, things flow from negative to positive. And so far, so good. But in doing the puzzle, every step we took, every piece we placed, the puzzle got what? Easier and easier. Here, this is a conscious choice. You know, the mind looks out and says, wow, that's available. I want that and I want that. But we have a subconscious mind that goes, oh, really? No, we don't need that. We're alive just the way things are. And those your subconscious mind, being a status quo pro, looks at this and says, hey, you got some struggling to do. In other words, if you ever walked up a hill, you know that each succeeding step is harder than the one before it. And so there's struggle. Now when you do that, a little bit, I had a special pencil. How do I do that? Anyway, when you do that, a little bit of this vertical line begins to haze out, begins to disappear, and transfers itself over to here. Not completely yet, but still it transfers. Then there's a sense of slippage. In other words, you get right up in here somewhere and you don't make it, what's going to happen? It's likely to slip all the way back down to the bottom, and people do that all the time. You know, we're not afraid of failure, we're afraid of embarrassing ourselves. And slippage is embarrassing. It's discomforting and disorienting. Okay, add to that, oh, by the way, when that happens, a little bit more of this vertical line disappears and comes down here. Then there's a sense of separation, and it's valid, a sense of separation. The feeling that when you get up here, it's not where you want to be. You want to be with your friends and family. Now, if any of you have ever set out to accomplish, to achieve, to be successful, you know I'm right when I say you have been ostracized, criticized. People say, what are you up to? Who do you think you are? You're not the same as you used to be. All your time and attention is put into that thing. I mean, come bowling with us for Pete's sake, or lighten up. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that goes on. You're separating yourself from family and friends, it feels. Now, they come back around again, but subliminally, it's very uncomfortable. And so, some more of that vertical line disappears and reappears over here. Then you got the big one. All of our mentors and coaches and teachers have said, if you're going to be successful, you got to pay the price. And what's a word starting in S that says the same thing? Sacrifice. You got to sacrifice. Yeah. And the subconscious mind goes, sacrifice? Shoot, I got nothing now. Not giving anything up. I sing that a lot. Oh, yeah, I want to be successful, but I don't want my Wednesdays to be interfered with. Yeah, and Friday night's important, and I like my weekends. I mean, you know that. And so by now, this vertical line has totally disappeared, and it's all over here, so what have we got? Now, this is negative, and this is positive. And how that occurs and evidences itself is that people say, well, I just wasn't cut out for that, or that was a scam, and I got misled, and that was more demanding than they led me to believe. In other words, they shame the dream. They shame the dream. I know you've seen that happen, maybe even felt it. And I'm not sure I haven't done it myself. It's just a natural thing to do until we know we don't have to do it that way anymore. What this does, it creates what I've called I think I'll put it down here, Sisyphus, S-I-S-Y-P-H-U-S, Sisyphus syndrome. Sisyphus syndrome. And Sisyphus, you might remember, was an evil Corinthian king who angered the Grecian gods in Greek mythology. And when he died, they fixed him. In other words, what they did, they committed him throughout eternity to push this big round rock up a hill, knowing full well when he got to the top what was going to happen. It was going to kind of slip and slide and rumble and tumble all the way back down to the bottom. He was going to have to push it up to the top, knowing it was going to come to the bottom, and he'd have to push it to the top, and it would come to the bottom. And he would struggle to get it to the top, and it would come to the bottom. The redundancy is on purpose. In other words, we could go on. You imagine that throughout eternity? And yet you're committed to keep trying, and yet you know what the results are going to be. That's what happens in here. The language of goal setting can set us up for this, and we're not even conscious of it. It's not a rational thing, but How governed are we sometimes by irrationality and feelings? There is no question about it. Yeah. Just the word goal has its problem. Just the word itself, G-O-A-L. Four-letter Anglo-Saxon word, stirs up a lot of feelings in us. Most Anglo-Saxon words do. There's a whole lot of four-letter Anglo-Saxon words that I could throw out here in the room, and you'd laugh or you'd be angry and upset, embarrassed. You know, they're powerful, powerful words. And this just happens to be one of them, and it's misused and misinterpreted a lot. For example, it's been my experience in sports, or in the goal language of selling and business, that they use a lot of sports language. Okay? No goal, no game, and all this kind of thing. And it's not a valid illustration. Not a valid illustration. All the sports I played had a goal, certainly. There was a line that we had to cross, or a basket that we had to get a ball through, or a base we had to reach, something. And there was something else there too. That across that line, or on the other side, there was 5, or there was 9, or there was 11, you know, and then in boxing there was 1, yeah, who was just as big, just as strong, just as intelligent, just as conditioned, just as trained as we were. Who was what? Trying to keep us from doing it. Trying to keep us from doing it. And it's never happened in my socioeconomic life. I've never had anyone say, no, Bern, you're not going to succeed through me.